In this presentation, I'm going to be talking about our paper, The Alchemy of Trust, the creative act of designing trustworthy socio-technical systems. And that's by myself, Lauren Thornton, alongside my co-authors, Bran, Knowles and Gordon Blair. And we're all based in Lancaster in the United Kingdom. Our research focuses on the design of trustworthy socio-technical systems. And the main contribution of our paper is the notion of alchemy. Alchemy as a word in itself connotes a mythical or magical attribute, much in the same way that trust is often described. And we chose this word specifically because of this property, but also because of the processes that alchemy involves and how they match the process of designing for trust, which is what we illustrate in our paper. So we describe alchemy as a metaphor of the process involved in successfully designing for trust, with a creativity across and between models. Alchemy is a useful metaphor for the approach, as it acts as a useful bridge between models, which can often feel prescriptive and rigid, and design, which is often flexible and open-ended. We argue that designers can become alchemists of trust, transforming, creating and combining models tailored to their specific context and creatively considering both stakeholders and their multiple trusts. So this paper is really an illustration of our thought process, which has been enhanced and advanced by the notion of alchemy. So in the paper, we describe the process involved of finding models, applying them to a context, and then really thinking about what else we need to do in order to inform design in a meaningful and useful way, whilst remaining true to the richness, nuance, and complexity of trust. So I'm going to be talking through that in this presentation. Firstly, to give a background to the context of our research, we focus on transdisciplinary research, so that involves multiple people working from multiple disciplines to solve really big, grand challenges facing society and the environment, for instance. But when working with other people from other disciplines, we often don't have the same experience or knowledge of norms and ways of working, even down to how data is formatted and presented. And so that can be a really big challenge. And this is where we think trust comes into play. So trust is recognised as being important for a whole raft of reasons, but in particular, we're interested in trust for facilitating collaboration, for managing uncertainty, and to enable researchers to have trust in data and models and published results and research. So we've specifically focused on the trust between collaborating researchers and scientists using secondary data and models. And this forms part of a wider body of work which we collaboratively engage in. We're particularly interested in this specific slice of trust in transdisciplinary research, because scientists really don't have the same trust signals that they would normally do if they were working with other people from the same discipline. And so we found that really interesting. And we think that we can help in designing a technology to aid with this. So we specifically focus on virtual research environments. These are similar to digital data repositories, but are kind of enhanced. So they enable collaboration in real time between people that are geographically dispersed. They also have some features which we think could be useful to foster trust, such as notebook technologies, inclusion of documentation, forums, etc. And so we're inspired by virtual research environments as this kind of technology that can help us to envision our work, although our work is generally applicable to a broader stream of socio-technical systems. So how might we build a virtual research environment that is worthy of trust in and of itself, but also of the data, models and other users within the system? There are many stakeholders involved, all of whom are coming from different experiences and placing their trust in different things. So we know that trust is important, but it can be really confusing at first because of the sheer number of definitions and conceptions of trust, and also the ways in which trust has been modelled. So often models are used to explain and simplify trust, i.e. to give an explanation of how trust works in a certain area. But when coming to design a socio-technical system, there aren't really any models we can pick up the shelf. We know that models are general anyway, so we wouldn't expect there to be a specific one that we could directly use. But during our research, we didn't seem to find any that could really help us. So we started by collecting several different models that we thought were applicable before trying to reduce the number into a manageable amount. So during this process, we discovered the distinction of models by Solner and colleagues, which suggests that trust models can take either a mediator or a trustee role. So in terms of our work, this would mean that a virtual research environment can be the object of trust itself or can mediate trust between users through the virtual research environment. So firstly, we have the mediator role. So technology mediates trust between users. So trust is really placed in the other user, and trust in the technology is only really modeled insofar as privacy, accuracy, security, and such like. But it's really modeled on the other user. So this is kind of more interpersonal trust. And then secondly, we have the trustee role, which models trust placed on the technological system itself rather than a user. So it doesn't model interpersonal trust. So this could be automation, AI, or as we've discussed, a virtual research environment. So we can kind of see that both these model types might be relevant to trust in our research, focusing on different aspects of trust in socio-technical systems. And this distinction really helped us to narrow down the potential models we chose to analyse. So I'll briefly go on to give an overview of the models we chose, but for a full detail, you can look towards the paper. So the first model, the trustee model by McKnight and colleagues. This focuses on trust in technology in a user to system relationship. So perceptual beliefs about a technology, which reflects the essence of trust in a specific technology. So this includes propensity to trust and in general technology, including trusting stance and faith in humanity on the truster. And then this is mediated by context, so institution-based trust. So this is situational normality and structural assurance, and the perceived characteristics of the technology. So these are functionality, which refers to the belief that a specific technology has capability or features to complete a task. Helpfulness, which refers to the belief that the specific technology provides adequate, effective, and responsive help for users when needed. And reliability, which refers to continuous, reliable operation and predictable response. For the mediator role, we chose the model by Riegelsberger and colleagues. This too looks at the truster. So that includes propensity to trust and willingness to take risks. And then they model context in terms of three forms of embeddedness. So these are temporal embeddedness, social embeddedness, and institutional embeddedness. So to pick one as an example, institutional embeddedness reflects the influence on the behaviour of trustees by institutions or organisations, including wider networks and parties. And then looking at the perceived characteristics of the trustee. So these are two intrinsic properties, ability and motivation. So ability is both domain specific and general in terms of, for instance, technical knowledge and intelligence. And motivation is divided into benevolence, which refers to the relationship between a truster and trustee and the extent to which the trustee wants to do good to the truster. And also internalized norms, which were also referred to as dependability and integrity. And this refers to the perception by the truster that the trustee acts in line with the principles, internalized codes of conduct, norms, and so forth. So we applied these models to the various forms of trust that exist within socio-technical systems and virtual research environments. So this includes trust in data, trust in people, and trust in systems, and these are all interrelated and interlinked. So they can't really be artificially separated, but for the purposes of this paper, we chose to look at each trust in turn and apply each of the trust models towards these. So this table is from our paper, and in it we apply each of the trusts to all the different characteristics. So I won't go into all of them now, but please see the paper for a full explanation of those. If we take, for instance, the fact that all three trusts are related to temporal embeddedness, institutional embeddedness, and reliability, but we can see that not every component is mapped to every part, and some, such as helpfulness, we didn't connect to any. And this was really because of the way it had been defined by McKnight and colleagues. But we do say in the paper that we think that this could be potentially linked to trust in people through virtual research environments. So we also note that, for instance, institutional embeddedness we applied to all three types of trust. And Riegelsberger and colleagues actually fold situational normality and structural assurance into this embeddedness. But we didn't actually, when we were applying these trusts, find that those actually mapped onto the characteristics. So when we analysed all of these components and their relative trust mappings, we did find relevance to all three types of trust. However, we found that neither of the models adequately characterised the landscape or helped us in our aim to inform the design of a trustworthy system. And this is really how we came up with the notion of alchemy. So we began to think about the next steps of our application and what we needed to do. And we realised that there were some processes involved that would really enable us to inform the design of a trustworthy socio-technical system beyond simply just taking a model and applying it. So firstly, we realised that some kind of combination is involved, that really you need to take different components and map these out, as no one model will accurately do that. Therefore, we need to find a way to mix and match existing models to create our own models based on this. But we realized that because some of the components were similar, you would have to kind of figure out which adequately represented all three types of trust. And then you would need to kind of think about what was missing and how these all worked for different segments of stakeholders. So for instance, it would be different to a researcher actively involved in collaboration, but this would be different to someone who with just a general interest or someone who has more knowledge, or even the fact that people arrive at trust in different ways. So we would need to factor all of this into our combination. And this really helped to think of that, the second point of alchemy, which is transformation. So we think that whilst model combination is important, to enact any model into design really requires some further transformation. So throughout this design process, we have found that going from selecting a model or models and translating them into design is a whole other process. Models are useful tools for explaining and understanding phenomena, but how do we actually put this into practice and into design? How do we translate a model into features, and should we? So we argue that because there are multiple stakeholders who use multiple modes and means to trust, we need this alchemy as necessary for the next steps of design. So whether that be, as we mentioned in the paper, patterns and affordances, or whether one model combining these would be sufficient. We don't really think that models are the end point, but they help us in the step to informing design. And so that's something we're really looking on working on next, is how we can use these models either in combination with or alongside other design tools to help us really successfully design. And then finally, creation. So we must also consider what these models return when translated to a specific context. How can we adequately create, explain and understand trust in order to design for it? So we believe that there is some form of creation needed, not only in the creativity needed to possess to be able to do this, but also in the ability to create based on long-standing models and to put these into practice. So overall, we've illustrated what we believe it means to be an alchemist of trust, enabling a new way of thinking about and designing for trust. We found the use of alchemy has facilitated much richer exploration of the nature of trust models in a design context and has advanced our thinking greatly, and we hope that others feel the same too. Thank you.